All right. Well, we're going to get started. Thank you for your patience. Good morning. Buenos dias. Welcome to the Resurrection Project. We're happy to host this wonderful event. I want to thank Mayor for joining us this morning, the Chairman of the Housing Committee, Chairman Osterman, also the Commissioner of the Department of Housing, Marissa Navarro, and one of our recipients of this program that we're going to be talking about this morning, Senor Duenas. Thank you all for being here. Let me do this, because as you know, the pandemic has really taken a toll on a lot of working class communities, particularly communities of color. Many families have been struggling to pay their rent, have been struggling to get back on track, and so we're excited this morning to announce the Chicago Emergency Rental Assistance Program that will help families deal with this burden of how will I pay my rent. This question is unfortunately many families have faced as a result of losing their jobs, struggling to get back on their feet, including Mr. Duenas, who you'll hear her story later this morning. The ERAP program, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, will provide grants up to 12 months of unpaid rent, 3 months of, and they'll also be eligible for up to 3 months of eligibility moving forward. This is very important because it's going to help not just the renter, but also the landlords. And we need the landlords and renters to be working together. The program will go online officially as of today. We encourage everybody to make sure to call 312-698-0202 or go online at www.chicago.gov/renthelp. This is a very important program, and I want to thank the mayor for initiating and making sure that our communities, particularly communities of color, are not left behind. The rental program, this emergency rental assistance program, will help families economically, but also more importantly, preserve their situation right now in terms of their living and not be displaced or evicted from their apartments. Buenos días, mi nombre es Raúl Raimundo, el Proyecto de Resiliency Ejecutivo. Estamos aquí esta mañana y quiero agradecer a la alcaldesa, a la comisionada del Departamento de Viviendas, Marissa Navarro, y al jefe del Comité de Vivienda, el concejal Osterman. Este programa que se va a anunciar esta mañana es muy importante para asegurarnos que las familias que tuvieron muchos retos durante la pandemia puedan ser asistidos, principalmente las familias de trabajadoras que no pudieron pagar su renta. Este programa les va a ayudar hasta 12 meses de ayuda para poder pagar su renta y también ayudar a los dueños de propietarios para que puedan también beneficiarse cuando los inquilinos paguen su renta, los dueños de casa también se benefician. El programa se está lanzando hoy, esta mañana, y es importante que se comuniquen al 312-698-0202 o vayan al internet y al correo electrónico de www.chicago.gov asistencia de renta, rent help. I want to thank the mayor because she's making a priority to make sure that communities of color benefit from these kinds of programs. La alcaldesa está priorizando estos programas para que comunidades de color se beneficien para poder pagar su renta. Ahora quiero invitar a la alcaldesa a que mencione, nosotros como organización somos parte de una red de organizaciones que va a estar implementando este programa. Vamos a tener accesible el internet para poder venir a aquellas personas que no puedan ir a su computadora. Aquí vamos a tener computadoras para poder ayudarles a hacer la aplicación. We're very proud to be part of a network of organizations that are going to be implementing this program. We are a hub in the city of Chicago. We are providing accessibility and online technology so that families can come here, apply online, or help them making sure that they can benefit from this program. Again, I want to thank the mayor and her team for making this program possible. And now I'm going to ask the mayor to come and share more. Mayor?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Raul. I have to say, I've been in this room many times. both as a candidate and as mayor. And this is a room that you come to listen. You come to be humble. You listen to what's going on in this community, and you hear it directly from the people. So it's always a pleasure to be here, and I got to commend Raul and the many, many folks who make the work of the Resiliency Project happen. We are here to, as Raul indicated, announce another initiative to help support our residents around one of the most important basic needs, and that's accessible, affordable housing. Let me also recognize the other members that are leaders that are here with me today, starting with Housing and Real Estate Committee Chairman Alderman Harry Osterman. Throughout the pandemic, Chairman Osterman has really been, I think, the conscience and the center of gravity in the City Council, making sure that we are thinking about and supporting and acting on behalf of landlords and renters. So Chairman Osterman, I want to thank you for that. I also have to give praise where praise is due, and that is to our great Housing Commissioner, Marissa Navarro. Marissa comes to us from a long history, not only as being a public policy expert and activist, and she has converted that knowledge and expertise every single day as she's been Housing Commissioner. And she is at the heart of all things good that are happening in the city around accessibility and affordability. So I want to thank you, Commissioner, for your hard work. Now, as we all know, over the course of this pandemic, residents all across Chicago and our entire country have been forced to reckon with a wave of socioeconomic fallout like nothing any of us had ever experienced before in our lifetime. Left and right, people have been losing their jobs. Schools unfortunately closed their doors, and students began this process of remote learning. Businesses shut down or were forced to shift their operation to online if they were lucky. And a list of forced activity that we had to adapt to really goes on and on. A crisis this unprecedented, with impacts this far-reaching, requires a response that is equally, if not more, unprecedented and bold and far-reaching. And because temporary scaffolding is never going to help who are struggling before the pandemic and during the pandemic, we need to put in place stable, long-term supports that will allow residents not only to survive, but to thrive long after this pandemic is in the rearview mirror. Last year here in Chicago, we got to work immediately in order to address the disproportionate impact COVID-19 has had on our most vulnerable residents and communities and small businesses. Taking advantage of the once-in-a-generation opportunity COVID-19 provided us with a way to eradicate some of these systemic inequities once and for all. We all knew they were there. We were all working on them. But COVID-19 has forced us to reckon with them now and not later. Some of the things that we did as a result were to create the Racial Equity Rapid Response Team, or RERRT, which uses a hyper-local approach to save the lives of Black and brown residents from COVID-19, connecting them to testing and care and vaccine. And as a consequence, these neighborhoods that surround the Resurrection Center and on the northwest side and the southeast side and in much of Black Chicago, where we were seeing absolutely terrible infection rates and deaths, now what we're seeing is a turnaround and seeing some of the highest vaccine rates in the city as a result of the partnerships that we built in the early days of the pandemic, and that will serve us well as we move forward past the pandemic and bring, for the first time, real meaning of community health equity in the city. We also created the Small Business Resiliency Fund, which helped to keep the doors of our small businesses and hyperlocal businesses open and nearly 9,000 workers employed. Taken together, these two efforts alone allowed us to build the foundation for a more equitable and inclusive healthcare system and economy. And along with our Department of Housing, I'm here today to announce another one of these, what I hope to be transformational investments, the official opening of applications for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This federally funded program, which stems from the federal package signed into law last December, helps to keep families in their homes by making funding available to residents who are unable to pay their rent or utilities. And it ensures that those who are most at risk of evictions as low-income residents are able to directly receive emergency funding when their landlords do not accept payment. So whether it's through the landlords or through direct payments to the renters, we want to make sure that we blunt what is we all fear is eviction and housing crisis coming just down the pike. It cuts the wait time in half for assistance offered to renters when landlords do not participate, protects renters from eviction while payments are being made on their behalf, and more. And in a time still marked by intense uncertainty, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program will bring a much-needed sense of stability to our residents who need it most. And it will serve as the department's third round of emergency rental assistance, and comes just in time before the statewide eviction moratorium is phased out this coming August. So, for more information and to see if you qualify, please visit chicago.gov/rent help. That's chicago.gov/rent help. And building on these investments, we also have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make even more progress in our mission of eliminating systemic inequity. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Biden administration enacted the American Rescue Plan, or ARP, to deliver direct relief to American people and rescue the American economy. ARP, in addition to previous federal packages such as the CARES package, has supported Chicago and our residents through a variety of ways, such as stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment insurance, and supporting the CTA and our airports. Funding for testing, tracing, and vaccines, small business support, housing, and the return to in-person learning. In addition, as a result of ARP, cities and states across the country have also received funding in order to ensure this relief and rescue is actually felt at the local level. It's now up to us as city leaders to be good stewards of this funding and complement other investments to make the transformative change our residents have been waiting for far too long. Like every other initiative we've made to support our residents during this most challenging time, we're leading with our values of equity and inclusion. These two values are and will continue to be our North Star. Because of these values, we want to make sure that we are engaging in robust community engagement. That is critically important. We're not going to come up with a plan downtown, pass it through City Hall, through City Council, and not talk to the community members and leaders and stakeholders who've been most impacted by COVID-19. We will be out in communities engaging you in what you see, what you're experiencing, and what you need. So this grassroots community engagement process will include, of course, automatic feedback, grassroots local roundtables, and engagement through our budget ambassadors so that residents can talk with community members that you know and trust. It will also include in-depth discussions with subject matter experts on the issues to ensure that we are giving voice to community and expert feedback on the critical needs of the city at this time. This is an effort that can't be accomplished alone or overnight, or through even one lump sum funding, but we've got to make sure that we are being fiscally prudent and doing the things that we know that are going to make an immediate impact on the lives of our residents. That's critically important. So we have a chance to start a new kind of economy in society, one that addresses the inequities that keep our most vulnerable residents in cycles of poverty, reduces crime, and increases student achievements, and above all, closes the wealth gap. So it's my hope and expectation that our residents and stakeholders will take advantage of this new, once-in-a-generation opportunity and partner with us to build a more equitable and inclusive Chicago. And our kickoff for this process will begin in early June, and more details to come. We know that there are key areas of need that are lingering and were not addressed by the previous rounds of federal funding. And we know we must invest in meaningful opportunities for our young people and their families to thrive. When our residents, especially our young people, have access to the tools they need to chase their dreams and reach their God-given potential, they are less likely to find themselves in difficult, unfavorable situations and are more likely to achieve success in the short term and long term. So a lot of what this work must be about, ladies and gentlemen, is setting our residents and particularly our young people for lifelong success. That has got to be one of our guiding principles as we think and engage in conversation about how we can make the kind of investments in our city that are going to be transformative. Now, and success doesn't have to start later in life. In fact, in order for all of our residents to have the best shot at success, we must ensure that they have access to opportunity from cradle to career and beyond. And these investments will then complement other forms of support, such as income assistance through direct payments and the child tax credit, child care facility and care expense grants, student support such as Chicago Connected and increasing more funding to our schools, nutrition programs like SNAP, school lunch programs and senior nutrition programs, and public health and mental health support. So we want to lay out the landscape of what's there now by community and then look at where the gaps are and what we can do to fill those gaps. We are going to be holistically investing in our communities that have been hardest hit by the health, safety, and economic impacts of this pandemic. And taken together with this emergency rental assistance program and ongoing support for homeowners, residents experiencing homelessness, and residents who just simply can't afford to pay for their basic needs like water and heat in their homes. These investments for our hardest hit communities will allow us to create even more social and economic safety net for those who are struggling the most. And as I said, our residents have to be a part of this process, which has the potential to push our city significantly closer to obtaining our goal of becoming more equitable and inclusive. And I look forward to engaging with all of you, working with the members of the City Council as we move forward and build a better, more robust, and inclusive City of Chicago. Let me just close by saying this. As I mentioned at the outset, I've been in this very space many times. I've listened to a lot of pain and a lot of anger coming from residents who feel like for way too long they've been left out, that their city hasn't seen or heard them. This is an opportunity for us to change that around entirely. Raul and his team and so many others in this community and others across the city are literally doing the Lord's work every single day. We need to step up, all of us, not just city government, but all of us, the whole of our city, and to be neighbors, to love each other that much more so that we conquer the inequities that are holding too many people back. We have an opportunity, and I think an obligation to do more and do better. And I want you to partner with me on this incredibly important journey. And with that, I will ask Commissioner Navarro to come and speak. Commissioner.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, for your continued support and commitment to ensuring that all Chicagoans have access to quality housing that they can afford across all 77 community areas and all 50 wards. And thank you also to Raul Raimundo and the Resurrection Project, not only for hosting us today, but for all the work they've done to make today possible. Since last March, in the wake of extensive shutdowns and restrictions on public gatherings, the meaning of home became so much more significant as we sheltered in place to avoid contracting and spreading the virus. But COVID shutdowns, while reducing the spread of the virus, have impacted many financially, threatening to cause an eviction crisis similar in scope to what we experienced in 2008. I'm proud to say that from the beginning of the pandemic, we have worked to provide shelter and financial assistance for those impacted by COVID, in addition to our ongoing work to expand access to housing that people can afford across the city. I'm even more proud and so excited to be able to stand here today to announce the third round of our eviction protection rental assistance grants today. In our first round last March, we received over 83,000 applications. and we were only able to help about 2,000 households. That showed us how deep the need was throughout our communities. Our next round was funded through the CARES Act and Chicago's philanthropic community, and we were able to provide over $24 million to assist over 10,000 households. We also established a no-cost pro bono legal assistance counseled program to assist people who were experiencing illegal lockouts or even illegal evictions despite there being a moratorium. So this new emergency rental assistance program will allow us to provide nearly $80 million, so 4 times what we were able to do in the past, to impacted landlords and renters. It is especially important, as the mayor mentioned, because we now know that the governor will be phasing out the eviction moratorium by August. Tenants and landlords can receive up to 15 months of assistance, 12 months of back rents, and up to 3 months going forward. And some residents may also be eligible for utility payment assistance. So I cannot tell you how delighted we are as a team at the Department of Housing to be in the position to really be able, finally a year later, to actually meet the scope of the need that this pandemic has created. Dispersing these funds requires partners just as committed to our residents, and for that I would like to thank the Resurrection Project, which will be providing case management services for the program and will help distribute 75% of the funds. This was really, really important to us. It was important to us that we find a staffing partner who agreed with and was guided by the same kind of goals for racial equity, for an equitable distribution across the city and across marginalized populations, and we did an RFP for that, and the Resurrection Project was the unanimous winner of that by far. So we're so grateful to be partnering with you all. This team in 30 days has stood up an amazing program, has hired more than 30 people. I mean, they've just been tireless. So major thanks to you all, and thank you to Raul, who it was about 20 years ago that Raul sent me to 10-day community organizing training. So to the degree that any of you have critiques about my organizing approach to this job, please direct them not to the mayor, but instead to Raul. I'd also like to mention Angela Abernathy is here from Uncork. Uncork partnered with us to provide a customized platform. We didn't have anything to be able to work at this scale. We were starting from nothing. Even though we had done 2 rounds, we had done them in a much different way. And the Uncork team really sat down with us and mapped out a platform and a process that we could use that was the most user-friendly. We're also working with more than a dozen community-based organizations to ensure that those who do not have technology access or simply need a trusted relationship can be guided through this process, in addition to the folks here at the Resurrection Project. And the reason for that is that we know we can't just open up a portal and say, whoever figures this out will get the grants and have a racially equitable result. We know we won't. And so we instead purposefully set up a range of partnerships across the city to ensure that we will hit the hardest hit communities and that our most marginalized residents receive the support they need to access these resources. I'd also like to mention my thanks to our policy director, Daniel Hertz. He's been living and breathing this effort since January 1st. We're all very excited that help for housing stability is here. So thank you so much. I am going to introduce Julian Duenas. He is a community member who's going to speak to the impact of resources like this on people's lives. Welcome, Julian.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Julian Duenas. ¿Puedo hablar en español? ¿O no? Me siento muy contento porque el problema que me pasó me quedé sin trabajo y me ayudaron mucho para pagar mi renta y todo, al landlord y todo, y estoy contento porque va a progresar este problema. Ya se está acabando todos los problemas que habían y es todo lo que tengo que decir. Agradezco mucho, gracias.
Short but sweet. Mr. Duenas lost his job during the pandemic, and he's very grateful for this program that assists him to pay his rent, and is glad that it's being expanded to help more families.
Thank you very much for those remarks from Julian. I think his story is a story that's being heard around the city today, and why we're here and why we've worked on this project. I want to take a minute to first commend Mayor Lightfoot on her leadership for helping guide our city through this last very, very difficult 16 months, which she did not knew she was going to happen when she got sworn in 2 years ago. But her leadership has helped guide and make our city safe and get us through the pandemic, and has us poised for a strong recovery. I also want to commend her on her steadfast vision, dedication, and perseverance to building a more equitable, inclusive city of Chicago. And I stand committed to working with her on that goal. I want to thank Raul and the leadership of the Resurrection Project and Mayor Lightfoot for their partnership in making this critical program to help renters possible. I want to thank Commissioner Marissa Navarro and the Department of Housing for their dedication and hard work in rolling out 3 rental assistance programs since the pandemic started last March. Because of Department of Housing's efforts, Chicago is ready to help renters facing the difficult burden of up to a year of missed rent and utility payments. With nearly $80 million, the Emergency Rental Assistance Programs launched today is by far the largest funding we've seen to date to assist renters who need it desperately. This program will provide those with the greatest need throughout the city the necessary assistance to keep themselves and their families stably housed. Help is on the way today. Chicago renters, landlords, reach out to the city and take advantage of this program. As we're here today to announce this funding, though, it's critical to say that we have a long road ahead of us. It'll be crucial that rental assistance continues to be funded and more programs for housing are funded with the help of the American Rescue Plan, which the mayor talked about earlier. As the chairman of the Housing and Real Estate Committee, I'm deeply committed to that as members of the City Council to work in partnership to make sure that we're able to house those in Chicago. The foundation of our city's recovery will be through stable, safe housing for every Chicagoan in every neighborhood. Thank you.
I'm happy to answer your questions, but I also want to emphasize one point that is critically important. These monies are available regardless of citizenship status. Very important for us to know. And there are many, many people that have been affected. Your citizenship status is not going to be a barrier to receiving access to these funds. Yes, sir.
Hi, Mayor. Ross Widener, ABC 7. When will you unveil your civilian oversight plan, and what are the key components you expect to include in that plan?
Well, it will be, as I mentioned, it's going to be filed today to meet the clerk's deadline. I just signed off on the final edits right before I came here. Where we started is really picking up where the prior GAPA proposal left off. We have a process for transitioning, creating a temporary commission and then getting to an elected commission. We allow for and don't disenfranchise the undocumented. Obviously, public safety is something that every resident of the city has a stake in, and we want to make sure that the undocumented community also has the ability to participate. So it has many, I think, of the key structures that you saw previously with GAPA, but we'll have more to talk about once it's officially filed.
Could you give us some more details about how it is different than GAPA?
Well, as I said, number one, there were and there are, I think, some holes with the old GAPA proposal. Now, I recognize that, and I actually just learned yesterday that there was yet another consolidated proposal that was filed, I guess, on Friday. I haven't had the opportunity to go through it in detail, so I can't give you the compare and contrast, but we have a team that's working on that. But bottom line is, we allow for a process, which I think is important, to really be engaged at the community level through the districts, the police districts, that not only are there three DAC committee members in each police district, but then they will also then be able to do outreach and form committees based upon what the individualized needs are in individual police districts. In addition to that, we do have a process for the selection of the police superintendent, and has criteria not unlike what's being used now, meaning there's a nationwide search, and that the commission will winnow the field and then present three candidates to the mayor for selection. Similar with the head of the police board, as well as the chief administrator for COPA. As I mentioned before, we don't disenfranchise undocumented, and I think that's a critical distinction point between what I've seen from some of the other proposals. Those are some of the key ones.
Who will select the members of the temporary commission?
That, under the current proposal, the draft that we have is going to be selected by myself and members of the Public Safety Committee of City Council.
How is that reformed? That's not what the community is asking for. They want the people to decide, not for you.
Well, I think ultimately that's the process that we'll move to, but right now we have to start somewhere, and since there's not a structure that's set up, we have a temporary commission that then transitions to a full commission, and we've got to make sure, obviously, that we set up the election process. That can't be done like that. I think there's an interest in getting something set up yet this year, and in order to do that, we've got to have an appointment process that then transitions to an elective process.
But ultimately, you'll be making the decisions about who will be another police superintendent or who's on this commission, correct?
Ultimately, yes. Public safety, I think, is one of the most critical responsibilities of any mayor, me and anybody who will come from me. The relationship between the mayor and the police superintendent is critically important. So we have a process by which the candidates will be vetted through the commission. The commission will make recommendations. But yes, because the buck stops with me, I will ultimately, as mayor and any other subsequent mayor, be making that decision.
Mayor, as Springfield winds up this week and you're watching the elected school board, what are you concerned about? Might they push ahead without your hybrid plan?
Well, what I hope is going to happen is the commitments that were made to us by the leadership in Springfield, that we will be at the table to help negotiate. Now, obviously, we've been in conversation, but that's not the same thing as being at the table. It's critically important, given that we're talking about, as you know, the most consequential change in governance for CPS in 25, 30 years. We have to be at the table. We have to be representing and advocating for parents and for our students, and I'm going to keep pushing to make sure that that happens.
I wondered also your reaction, maybe, I'm not sure if you had heard about this yet, but Father Flager is being reinstated to St. Sabina's.
Yes, I did.
His voice has been quite silent for 5 months. What are you hoping for with his reinstatement?
Well, look, I heard about it just as I was coming here today. Here's what I know. I know that Father Mike has sacrificed his life and dedicated himself to service. I know that he is an important center of gravity in the Auburn-Gresham community, and I know that he is conscious for many of us around issues of gun violence that plagues way too many communities in the city, and he is an advocate for victims. I'll learn more about the process, but I think we had to trust the Archdiocese process. That process is now concluded, and I'm grateful that Father Mike will be back at St. Sabina's, and I'm sure there's rejoicing all over that community as a consequence. I also want to say this. One of the things that I think is we can't ever lose sight of is people came forward and said that they were victimized, and they deserve to be heard. The Archdiocese went through a process to evaluate those allegations. And again, we'll learn more in the coming days, I would suspect, as to what that process was. But the fact that those men now came forward and spoke the truth is something that we can't ever undermine or underestimate.
Mayor Lightfoot.
Yes, sure.
But the Archdiocese is saying it wasn't true. How do you know that they spoke the truth?
Well, I'm not saying that they, what I'm saying is they came forward and made allegations. The Archdiocese, and as we should have, took those allegations very seriously and went through a very thorough process to evaluate those allegations, have now come to a conclusion.
Okay, over the weekend, Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart sat down with the Chicago Tribune editorial board and talked about 94 individuals who have been charged with murder are out on home monitoring, and many are committing crimes. Is there any way you could talk to Kim Fox, meet with Judge Evans to reverse this? Because this might help, eliminate homicides and attempted homicides in our city.
I've been very outspoken on this issue. We've seen an explosion in the number of people that are out on electronic monitoring and pretrial release. Obviously, at the height of the pandemic in April, May of last year, Cook County Jail was a COVID hotspot. That was a significant problem. So a lot of efforts, and particularly on the part of our Department of Public Health, were made to decompress. But we got to do it in a way that doesn't compromise public safety. I'm very aware of those numbers, and I've been outspoken with folks at Cook County, particularly Chief Judge Evans, the presiding judge of the criminal courts, and yes, State's Attorney Fox. Obviously, people who are not a danger to the community or flight risk shouldn't be locked up in Cook County Jail. Cook County Jail should not be a debtor's prison. But there are some, and you've identified them, who have a long history of committing acts of violence in communities that threaten safety. If that's not the definition of a danger to the community, I don't know what is. And let me just finish. And there has to be some consequences for those individuals, not only in terms of pretrial detention, because when they're cycling through the system and back out on the street 24 or 48 hours later, what does that say to the victims? What does that say to the witnesses? Are you going to come forward and risk your life if you don't think that the criminal justice system, that those doors are open for you as a victim or a witness? No, you are not. But the other thing I will say is Cook County criminal courts have to fully open up. We've got to move these cases through the system. Justice delayed is justice denied. And if we've got people that are waiting literally years, waiting for their day in court, what are we doing here? And what we don't want to see is a trend that has been well reported over the year of people pleading guilty for crimes that they don't believe that they were guilty of because they want to get out from under the yoke of the criminal justice system. So the full criminal justice system in this county must be back up and operational, and all of us have to work that much harder to make sure that we're making communities safe.
And now that COVID seems to be kind of under control and that the prisoners are getting vaccinated, so do you think this will change soon?
It's my sincere hope. We all met within the last 2 weeks to talk about these issues. We all made a commitment to continue the dialogue, but we can't release people on pretrial release, particularly EM, and not provide additional supports. The EM population, both the one run by the sheriff as well as the one by the courts, has ballooned over the last year. I don't even have accurate numbers, which should tell you something. But the bottom line is that population has increased dramatically, but the supports that are necessary to support that community, maybe intervene, maybe turn hearts and minds in a different direction, hasn't matched the growing number of people that are out on pretrial release. Now, that's not our responsibility as a city, but given that the consequences of that are playing out every single day in our communities, we will and will continue to step up. But it's got to be a partnership with all the actors here in the city and the county working collaboratively together. I'm committed to it. I know others are. We just got to keep that work going.
Okay, now a week ago to today, which feels like a month ago, you said that you didn't feel comfortable without your mask outside or indoors, and over the weekend and late last week, people, took videos of you without your mask on. Some see that as disingenuous. Do you just feel more comfortable now? Or how has
there
your
have been some
position changed?
There have been some circumstances that I've been in where I've known everybody in the room has been fully vaccinated. So that's a different set of circumstances. But if you see me outside, for the most part, as you saw me today coming in here, I'm still going to have my mask on. I think we've got to keep pushing the public health guidance that we think is important, not the least of which is get vaccinated. The more people that get vaccinated, the more we're going to see comfortable spaces. I was in Hyde Park on Saturday at a music event that was specifically for people who had been vaccinated. So there, when I know I'm vaccinated and everybody around me is, that's a safe space. So I will take my mask off in those circumstances. But in general public, where I don't know if you've been vaccinated, I don't know if she's been vaccinated, I don't wear my mask.
Mayor, the City Council Public Safety Committee is meeting today, and they are, of course, looking at the discussion about police misconduct complaints going back a couple decades. Apparently, there's newly revised ordinance that was sent around yesterday, Block Cub, reporting that the added language clarifies that the database will include records of complaints that were not sustained, unfounded, or exonerated. It also clarifies that the new database will extend to records kept by the now dissolved Independent Police Review Authority and other predecessor agencies to the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. Do you support those changes? Where do you want to go on this database?
Yeah, of course I support it. We made an announcement, myself, Chairman Taliaferro, and Chairman Wegas back last week. We've actually been working together with our staffs for weeks now to come to a resolution that we all felt that were comfortable. There were some tweaks that were made to the initial language, but the intent was always to go back to 2000 to cover OPS, IPRA, and now COPA. And the Bureau of Internal Affairs, obviously, and to make sure that we are putting out a fulsome record, including not sustained cases. And some made some suggestions about language tweaks to clarify that which is all fine. So the proposal that's going forward in the committee today is one that I fully support.
Will the records live online, or do we have to FOIA to get the records?
No.
Information?
So the way this is going to work is we are, in the interest of time and expense, we're going back to 2000. We're going to be digitizing all the summary reports from that time period, which is going to take some time. I've forgotten now what the records are, but it's literally tens of thousands of records. That will be vetted through the law department and then hosted online through the Public Safety Inspector General. And obviously, if people have interest in a particular case or cases, then they'll be able to identify those, and we'll expedite the FOIA requests that come in the door. But we want this kind of massive database. And let me just be clear, folks, this is monumental. 20 plus years of CR files going out for the public to review. It has never happened before in the city of Chicago. So there are going to be people who say whatever they're going to say, but the fact of the matter is, it's through leadership and collaboration and cooperation, we're putting 20 years worth of CR information out on a publicly available, digitized, you can search it, website. Never happened before. And so I don't want that accomplishment to be diminished by some who are yapping around the margins about it doesn't do this and doesn't do that. Tell me any other time in the history of the city that we've done that. And the answer is never. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
At the same time, those who have resigned, like
Say it again.
those who have resigned, their files are not going to be public. We're not going to see Eddie Johnson, for instance.
Well,
And many others.
so no, that's not true. CR files obviously are different than other kinds of investigation. CR files, whether you resigned or not, whether it was sustained, not sustained, those are all going to be available. Thank you, everyone.